All right, so this is the special weather briefing for June 14th. We are actively in a severe weather mode right now. In fact, we're in severe weather ops. We've already got a tornado watch out, and I'll cover that in a second. But just to look at the highlight, um, the severe weather risk is now through this evening, and then we'll see a secondary round through the night or overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. The primary risks for today are basically all hazards, damaging winds, tornadoes. We've actually already issued a couple tornado warnings. Large hail up to 2 inches, even though that threat is going to be confined mostly to today. And then frequent excessive lightning will definitely be in play for throughout the period. Flash flooding is also possible through Thursday morning in particular, but really into tomorrow night as we see how things unfold between today and tomorrow. There is it's sort of broken into rounds, the way this is going to play out. Round 2 is possible tonight, and it is really contingent upon how things play out this afternoon. And I'll dive into that a little bit here in a second. So the latest radar loop, the things that I want you to focus in on here is the area to the south, which is down over central Georgia from, say, Columbus to Macon south. That is a batch of storms that have developed and are moving into the area that was hit by the storms earlier. The storms earlier cleared out in time for us to destabilize, and now we're seeing new development. The secondary area is what you see up across northern Mississippi and northern Alabama. That is developing into more of a complex that's moving to the south and east. Each have their own unique characteristics and will be impacting us sort of differently, but eventually we'll be coming together. So the stuff across northern Alabama will be impacting the metro probably in the next several hours. We're already starting to see some of the storms on the front edge of that move into the area now, but we're looking later this afternoon through the rush hour for that stuff across northern Alabama. The stuff to the south from, say, Troup County down to Columbus eastward, that is ongoing now through the afternoon, and we'll see how things play out with the complex to the north moving into this later this afternoon and evening. And that's where things get really complicated, is how the stuff to the north interacts with the complex that's developing to the south. So let me erase this. Taking a look at the satellite, you can see this starts early this morning. We had the cloud cover with the early storms and convection move out. We had a brief period of clearing, which enabled us to destabilize enough. And as soon as we destabilized, you can see the storms developing in eastern Alabama, southwest Georgia. At the same time, focus your eyes up across northern Alabama. You'll see that complex of storms moving to the southeast. Obviously, two areas working independently, but like I said, ultimately, we do expect them to sort of come together across Georgia later this afternoon and evening into the overnight. What you can't see in this is the potential overnight round that would be developing back across Louisiana, Arkansas, and that will play into our forecast overnight and tonight into tomorrow morning. So the latest on the watches, there are 2 watches out, one in Alabama that butts up against Georgia from, say, Heard County south, and then we have a tornado watch in Georgia that was issued about 2 hours ago for much of southwest Georgia. The areas that are in the tornado watch are really where the tornado risk is going to be highest. The wind shear is a little bit better for tornadoes in that vicinity. The further north and east you get, the wind shear isn't as great, and the risk would not be as great for tornadoes. However, the risk for severe storms is still possible north of where the tornado watch is, and we'll have to see how the complex out of Alabama moving southeast into the area that's not in any watch right now plays out. But in talking to SBC earlier, we would anticipate potential severe thunderstorm watch being issued if we see that the complex sort of getting its act together and moving southeast into that region. The area has destabilized a little bit across the metro in particular, and so again, we'll have to watch that in the next few hours. But back to the tornado watches, that is in effect through 7 p.m. tonight. And again, like I mentioned, would anticipate possible other watches later. And we'll have to see how things play out beyond 7 o'clock tonight with the stuff this afternoon. Flash flood watch. This is in effect through tonight or tomorrow night at 7 p.m. We are expecting multiple rounds, obviously. Round 1 ongoing, round 2 maybe overnight tonight. 2 to 5 inches of rain is possible, and I'll cover rainfall in a second, particularly in the flash flood watch area. And it really looks like the heaviest threat is going to be where the flood watch is and points south of there, with a particular focus in the Columbus area, southeastward through, say, Americus, over into Cordele. That seems to be where a lot of the models are honing in on the greatest risk for flash flooding, which happened to coincide with the greatest risk for severe as well. So I want to point that out. Here is that moderate risk. You can see it was updated at 12:30, and it was extended just about 1 row of counties north. The enhanced risk, the same. It was extended maybe 1 row of counties north and just creeping up into the southern metro. But you can see the moderate risk from just north of Columbus, eastward to about I-75 in Cordele, and then rounding out down south across Albany and southwest Georgia into Tallahassee's area. Of course, with this, frequent lightning, damaging wind, tornadoes, hail, and very heavy rainfall, again, all hazards expected or possible with this particular moderate risk, which is rare for us to see this in June for what it's worth. So when we break out the individual threats, the severe wind threat, the hatched pink area, that coincides with a 45 to 60% probability of seeing damaging winds within 25 miles of a point. The hatched area mean probability of significant wind gusts of greater than 74 miles an hour. A lot of that is going to be coinciding with any complex of storms that come through. And again, when this risk was first put together, we were focusing in on the overnight risk coming in tonight, but the risk for this afternoon certainly exists on a more individual cell threat. And that's what we're seeing now on the radar. You can see a lot more individual cells. Those individual cells are going to pose more of a tornado and hail risk with some damaging wind, but the damaging wind threat, again, is going to coincide more in line with a larger complex of storms, which is more likely to occur late tonight. Here is the tornado outlook. Again, 10%, which again is unusual and pretty high. Also with a hatched area for significant tornadoes. And that is, again, largely due to the fact that we have a lot more wind shear available to us down there, along with a lot more instability. I will say the tornado risk does decrease pretty rapidly as you head further north and east, to the point where there's much lower risk across North Georgia. And it's really I-20 and southward where the tornado risks begin to increase, but really focused in on southwest Georgia. Here's the severe hail outlook. It was updated to extend a little further east with the hatched area and large hail. That would be up to 2 inches. But for the most part, the greatest threat looks like it will be a little bit further west, and most likely with individual cells, which is what we're seeing now across southwest Georgia. The larger complexes that come through will likely have some hail with them, but maybe not as great of a risk for the extremely large hail. So this afternoon into this evening, looks like the hail threat will be maximized and then begin to diminish a little bit later this evening into tonight. So here is the rainfall breakdown for today. WPC did update us to a moderate risk across southwest Georgia, and that is basically from about the Columbus area southward for flash flooding. And that coincides with the rainfall forecast of anywhere from 2 to as much as 4 inches in some spots for just day one today. Again, the greatest risk will be in that area across the south, where we seem to be lining up with the storms not only we had this morning, the storms this afternoon, the complex coming in from the northwest today, and then the complex coming in overnight tonight across middle Georgia. So that's going to coincide with some pretty hefty rainfall amounts, and we'll have to watch for significant flooding and the flash flood risk across that area in particular. When we accumulate the next 3 days, which is today, tomorrow, and into Friday, this is what it looks like. That orange area is 5+, so anywhere from 5 to 7 inches, but generally speaking, 2.5 to 5 possible along and south of a Lagrange to Macon line through the next 3 days. Elsewhere across North Georgia, basically up to 2.5 inches, and there could be some isolated areas where we see a little bit more than that if we can get any cells or storms to train over the same regions. But obviously the threat is obviously greatest along and south of that Lagrange to Macon line and across all of South Georgia. So let's walk through the timing. And the models have been, let's just say, sporadic, because one complex of storms is having an impact on the next, and then the next, because we're talking about, when you look at what we had this morning, we had one complex, we have one setting up now, and then we have another one potentially coming in overnight. This morning's is having an impact on how this afternoon's is shaping up, and this afternoon's is going to have some kind of an impact on how overnight tonight shapes up and plays out. So the models are having a hard time with this because each one is a little bit different. But I'm going to take you through what a model that looks like it is most in line with what is going on. So this is the 3 o'clock time frame. You can see a lot of the cells to the south. You can see the storms across northern Alabama beginning to translate to the southeast. By 5 o'clock, we see the complex over northern Alabama moving into the metro, and we see the storms across middle and south Georgia potentially consolidating into what looks like maybe a line. If you draw a line like this, they're somewhat consolidating, and that is possible with this stuff today, especially if we start to destabilize a little bit more across east and southeast Georgia. We'll see this begin to develop into more of a complex. It may have an impact on the stuff coming in, and it may try to weaken it, or it may not, depending on how unstable the area gets across northwest Georgia. But that still remains to be seen through the afternoon. Moving on to the next time frame, let's go to 7 o'clock. You can see still some maybe scattered showers around the metro, and then that line really pushes south out of our area, maybe just south of Americus and Cordele. And this is where we expect, or the models are expecting, things to maybe hang up this evening. So there may be a brief reprieve across North Georgia this evening, but still maybe some scattered stuff around. It remains to be seen. We'll have to see how things play out. But I would expect, if we get a line like this to move through the area from Macon to Dublin, down across the southeast, you guys may get a brief reprieve as well this evening with the stuff coming through this afternoon, which would be expected. But then if I go forward one more time frame to 9 o'clock, you can see that the line still, the remnant line still exists, maybe up across Americus, and may try to start to back up to the northwest. As I'll point it just off the screen here, comes the next complex in from the west into Alabama by about 9 o'clock tonight. And we should see this start to develop later this afternoon out to our west, maybe Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. But we'll have to watch that closely as it begins to translate east. But really where this line sets up is going to be critical. Is it a little bit further north, or is it a little bit further south? Because this complex coming in from the west is going to want to try and ride wherever that front boundary sets up this afternoon and this evening, which makes it a little more of a challenge for us to determine the locations most at risk for the overnight. And then finally, the last frame on this is 12 p.m. Here comes that complex in from the west. Again, it is showing development up across the northern side, and you're seeing it develop, maybe get up into the metro. There may be hail and some wind threat with these storms across the north, but it will be greatest along and south of wherever that boundary is. So in this particular run, if I were to draw a line from Macon to Columbus southward is where the greatest risk is, and even greater maybe across deep south Georgia. If we see a complex like this, but it really depends on where things set up today. But this would be at 12 a.m. This would move through, and then we would maybe clear things out by early morning. But timing of this is going to be tricky. But right now, the best timing looks like midnight through about 2 or 3 a.m. tonight for this secondary complex coming in. So, in quick review, the severe weather risk obviously now through this evening. As I mentioned, damaging wind, tornado, large hail. Again, the large hail threat was extended eastward a little bit in Alabama, approaching western Georgia. And then lightning, we've already seen some reports of a lot of lightning strikes causing issues. I would anticipate that in this environment, a lot more lightning issues with this particular event. And again, I mentioned the flash flooding, and then I also mentioned the round 2. So with that, that is the last of the slides. We are in chat and providing support now. We have ongoing warnings. Looks like only severe out right now. The tornado warnings are further south in Tallahassee's area. And then we have a severe up against northwestern Georgia in Birmingham's area with the first round of storms that are moving into northwest Georgia that we'll have to watch as it gets into the metro the next few hours. But if you have any questions, post them in the chat. With that, I will stop the recording.